Hey everyone. Long-time lurker, first-time poster to this sub. Please feel free to leave me your opinions of this event. So, back in junior high, I was on the volleyball team. I live in a very rural community. Every year, the school would do a little fundraiser for all the sports teams at this tiny park. It had a couple makeshift booths, a kitchen area, and a stage. Each team would come up with a game, and the players would take turns running that booth. In those days, I was attached to the hip with one friend in particular, who I'm still close with to this day. I shall name her Chris. Both of us played sports and attended this event together. Her mom dropped us off at the park and was to pick us up after the event was over so we could help with the cleanup. Both our working shifts were early, so we both had a lot of downtime. We danced the night away, and right before the event was over, we decided to go play some football with some of our friends. This park is basically just a bunch of fields and trees separating the different field segments. There's a parking lot when you first enter the park, where everyone was parking that night. Directly in front of the parking lot is the location for all the booths. This whole setup is on top of a big hill, and at the bottom of this hill is where we played football. We had just enough lights from the booth area to see. So, on with the rest of the story. I was picked as a sitter for the first game. I get bored easily, and noticed my dad's first cousin was walking around the parking lot. He's on the rescue squad, and was basically just patrolling. Now this man isn't someone I've seen often in my life, but enough that I know who he is and he knows me. Right before this event, my parents went through a divorce. This man and his wife picked up some furniture with my mom for her new home. They were literally with us the entire day about 2 weeks before this event. The following conversation just gets creepier the older I get. I walked right up to my cousin and said, "Hey, how are you?" He responds with, "Hey girl," which is a very usual response for him. He wrapped his arm around my shoulders. Again, very normal behavior for him, so no red flags. We made small talk, and he asked polite questions about my family that I answered politely as well. The whole time we were talking, he asked normal adult questions, and I bring up the furniture he moved into my house. This is where things got weird. This whole time, he's walking me around these cars with his arm around my shoulders. It's a decent-sized lot, and I realize we're heading to the far corner, about 2 car lengths until we reach darkness and a grove of woods that circles around this park. I stopped, but he kept gently guiding me towards this grove of trees. It was weird, and I was starting to sense some red flags. His grip also tightened up a bit, but at the same time I was just confused about what was happening. I put my arm around his lower back and sort of spun us around, so we got a few feet back towards the center of the lot. I guess I surprised him a little, but when we regained our footing, he just stopped moving and stood there, arms still around me. At this point, I kept saying to him that my friends were waiting and I needed to go, yet he just kept talking. I'm no longer letting him guide me around, and just when I'm about to kick him in the sunshine place, I hear Chris. She yells very loudly and comes running down into the lot. She also makes a big show about getting her basketball coach's attention, saying we would be right over to do something. Finally, his death grip loosened, and I started to walk away. My mind was reeling, and I was so confused, but I wanted this guy to realize I was onto him. I turned once I was at a safe distance, and said that I would tell my dad that he said hello. This goofy-ass clown of a man straight blank says, "Who's your father?" I'm completely flabbergasted, but I tell him my dad's name. Even though it was under bad lighting, I swear I could see the color draining from his face. He just said, "Oh," and started to walk away. To this day, I have no idea who this man thought I was or why he was guiding me to the dark. We talked about both my parents and their divorce during our stroll, so it beats me. I did tell my mom about the situation, and she said that he was just a goofball and to stay away from him from now on. I know this isn't the creepiest Let's Not Meet. I just hope some younger person can learn something. I was too scared of making a scene, and really think, looking back on it, that I was in a bit of danger. My friend Chris later told me she had watched part of what happened, and got creeped out because she realized that he was leading me into the woods, and I was very clearly trying to walk away. That's why she ran over screaming and got adult attention. It's so weird because, as a young person, you're afraid of causing a scene over nothing. But your safety is always more important than that. If a situation ever makes you uncomfortable, you should always do whatever you can to get out. This happened at a large shopping centre in Adelaide, South Australia, just a couple of months ago. The images at the bottom will easily show where exactly, but I'm not too concerned about that. For some context, it was around 7 p.m. on a late trading night, already completely dark outside. I was shopping with my partner, and she went looking into a clothing store, both to make some returns and also to try on some replacement clothes. I knew it was going to take a little bit of time, and I'm not overtly interested in women's clothing, so I stood outside in the very busy center. I was responding to some work emails on my phone, paying very little attention to all the people walking past. After about 5 minutes, I was approached by a fairly young-looking gentleman, early to mid-20s at most. I'm only 23 myself. He had a very strong European accent, possibly French, and said something to me along the lines of, "You were with a girl, yes? She was looking for you. She came up to me, I think, because we're wearing similar shirts and thought you were me." Thinking back at it, other than the buttons, our shirts weren't similar at all. He told me that she had been trying to find me, and made it seem like something was wrong. He insisted he could show me where she went. I looked into the store where she had been, and I couldn't see my partner anywhere. It was a fairly small clothing store inside the center. You could see all of it from outside. I only found out later that she was in a changing room in the back. I was extremely confused at the time. My partner knows I would be just aimlessly pacing in circles outside as I do when I'm reading emails, and would never walk off looking for me, not to mention she could have just texted or called. Although confused, he was moving away fast enough that I didn't have any time to ask many questions, and not being able to see my partner convinced me to at least follow to see where he was going. There had to have been hundreds of people around, so I wasn't very worried for my own well-being. As I followed the gentleman, I was leaving a good 2 or so meters behind us, walking behind. I don't remember feeling overly unsafe or concerned about being near him, just confused and unsure. He could see that, and kept repeating something along the lines of, "This isn't a joke. Please believe me, I want to help. Come with me. She went this way. I saw where she went." We had only been walking for about 10 seconds at this point, but we covered a fair bit of distance from the store I was originally at. I said something like, "Where was she going? What did she say to you?" He told me, "Sorry, my English isn't very good. She's this way." We kept walking like this for another 10 seconds before we reached the doors to the building. We were on the side of the center that has doors leading both to a car park and a large loading dock for one of the supermarkets. Although busy in the center, there was almost no one around the doors going in and out. The man walked straight outside and said something along the lines of, "She was just sitting on this bench. I don't know where she could have gone." Other than a small bit of light under the cover where a bench is, It was completely dark as soon as you walked any further away. I walked up to the point where the automatic doors open, but I stopped and went no further. I looked around, 1 foot outside and 1 foot in. He said something to me. "She must have walked this way. Come, I'll help you find her." And he started to walk to the left. It only leads to a dark and secluded loading dock, not visible from the doors inside. You could tell the urgency he was trying to convey to follow him. I was already confused and unsure up until that point, but as soon as it happened, I knew that whatever he wanted me to follow him down there for wasn't any good. It was one of those moments where you just piece it all together and realize how many warning signs you noticed but ignored. I instantly felt like I was in danger. All I remember saying is, "All good, thanks. I'll call her." I turned straight around and ran back inside. I turned around after a few seconds, but I couldn't see him anywhere outside anymore. Although it felt like forever, all of this must have transpired in only about 45 seconds from when he first started talking to me. It was at this point I texted my partner, who let me know that she was still in the same store I last saw her at. At the time, I think I said to her that I was almost abducted. A bit over the top, especially for a fairly large 20-year-old bloke, I think. I'm assuming if I went down there, I was going to get robbed or possibly something worse. I'm glad I'll hopefully never know. I went straight to the center security and reported it. They took some details of where and when it happened, but they didn't seem to be particularly concerned. I've been working at a department store for the past 2 years. Although retail wasn't something I wanted to necessarily do, it was much better than my previous job in the food business. I was grateful to not have to touch food all day, and would take the world of customer service much more gratefully than the food industry. It was the middle of January, and the store is usually quite dead towards the end of the day. Usually, the following month after Christmas is never really busy, due to people not trying to spend money after the gift-giving season. The cold weather of the winter season in Canada never really helped the situation much. People not in the mood to leave the comfort of their own homes in the middle of a snowstorm and all that. That meant that they put less people on shift, and I was alone in the fitting room. I work at a pretty big store, and alongside the weather conditions, that meant that the employees were usually spread out on the floor. We weren't in close proximity in comparison to what they put during the busy season. None of us wore earpieces, as we did most of our paging through the speaker system. It was a Wednesday night at around 8, and the store closed at 9. I was usually put on the cash register, but often frequented the fitting room when they needed help. It was a very quiet night, and I spent the first couple of hours of my shift helping organize the beauty section that's right next to the fitting room, or to go speak to my lovely coworker who worked in the jewelry section, helping the few customers that actually wanted to try clothes on when they came by. There was a man who came to the fitting room with 2 dress shirts. I didn't think anything of it. After all, he was nothing I've never seen before. Older, tall, kind of stocky, a bit muscular, and overall pretty plain. I did notice that he seemed dressed rather nicely, a clearly expensive suit and a nice shoulder bag. I assumed he must have come to the store after his day at work. I counted the number of articles he was bringing in, as that was mandatory in order for me to monitor the flow of clothes and try to stop theft. I handed him a number corresponding to the number of articles he was taking in, and asked him politely to put the clothes back on the hanger, in French rather than English, because Quebec requires us to speak French first to customers. He replied with a simple, "No problem." I noticed he had a thick accent, although I wasn't and still am not able to place a finger on it. I think it may have been Russian, but I can't say for sure. The man walked into the fitting room, and I didn't think much of it. I helped the other customers who came out of their rooms, counting the articles they came out with and matched it with their numbers, then hung them back on their place on the rack. A few moments passed by, and the man came out. Not really putting much thought into it, I took both the dress shirts from him. He didn't want either of them, and took back his number. I said thank you and turned to place the clothes on their rack. Usually, this is the point where the customer would just leave the fitting room, but when I turned around to go back to the front, he was still there. I asked him if there was anything I could do for him, or if he wanted the shirts that I had just put away. The man smiled and looked at me, not answering, and I felt a weird feeling in the pit of my stomach. He was looking at me as if he wanted to say something, and me, being the 5'4" girl who hates confrontation of any time, just nervously laughed. I started to organize the desk at the front of the fitting room entrance, awkwardly arranging all the numbers, although they were already in order. He asked for my name, to which I just looked down at the name tag I was wearing and repeated it. He told me it was a beautiful name. I laughed nervously, never knowing what to do in these sort of situations, and being nice to him was part of my job in customer service. Besides, he didn't really do anything wrong, just paying some compliments. I said thank you and looked away, trying my best to avoid eye contact. The man just stood there for what felt like 20 minutes, but was in reality just a little bit over 3. He stood there the whole time as I began to help other customers, and it was beginning to make me feel uncomfortable. I didn't want to be rude, but I also didn't want to subject myself to his uncomfortable staring for the rest of my shift, or however long he was planning to be there. I asked him if there was anything else he needed help with. Here's when I began to get scared. He proceeded to tell me that he would be waiting for me outside at 9:30, outside the doors of our store. He wanted to take me out. Confused, I looked at him oddly. How did he know that we were going to finish at that time? The store closed at 9, and sometimes we'd spend 30 minutes cleaning out the store. I suppose that information isn't hard to guess, but it still felt a bit weird. Why did he even want to take me out in the first place? I once again laughed nervously because that seems to be the only thing I'm capable of doing when I'm uncomfortable, and politely declined. I told him I had to get home and study. The man laughed and took a step closer to me. I instinctively took a step back. He didn't accept that answer because he just smiled once more. I'll be waiting for you outside the door while the employees leave from, in the truck alley. I'll be there. There was a door that employees exited the mall from because the normal doors usually locked at 9:15. We always finished later than that, so we take the door that takes us in a slight alley where all the trucks go to drop off shipments for our store. Being someone who hates confrontation and doesn't do well with controlling my emotions, I felt myself starting to tear up at his comment. No employee is allowed to mention the door we leave from. It's a company rule. Since we usually finish late and the parking lot is dark, they don't want anyone to know where we exit from as a precaution. I told him once more that I appreciated his offer, but I wasn't interested and I had to continue my work. I politely told him to leave when he put a hand on my shoulder, and I felt myself freezing up. I remember thinking, praying that one of my coworkers would show up to pick up the rack, or the jewelry employee would stop filing the cases and turn around. Obviously, with my luck, nobody did. He told me I was a pretty girl, and he couldn't wait to meet me in the alley at the end of my shift. He said he had a nice apartment and a cute dog, as if a dog was going to make me change my mind, and that we could have a fun time. Desperate, I told him I had a boyfriend, and he was going to be picking me up, hoping that would deter him, but he just laughed. He said my name, and then told me that wasn't something that usually stopped him, placing his hand on my shoulder this time. I honestly began to feel really scared. I excused myself to use the phone on my desk, shaking his hand off me that I hadn't realized was gripped on me super tightly. I paged the number for my coordinator, who curtly replied before I was even able to get a word in that she was busy with a customer, and then immediately hung up. Unsure of what to do, as the man was still next to me, Since he followed me to my desk, I called my manager, who thankfully replied. When he saw that I was speaking with someone on the phone, the man left the fitting room, but that didn't make me feel any better. I told my manager what had happened, and with good reason, she freaked out, telling me I needed to report him immediately. She reminded me that with people like that, I really have to be careful. She told me to call security, to which I did, and the security guard told me he had an eye on him through the camera. It was around 8:30 at this point, and I was getting ready to start my closing tasks, still paranoid about what the man had said. To be fair, I'm a paranoid person already, and I watch way too many murder documentaries, so I may be overthinking. This all sounded just like the beginnings of an abduction movie, honestly. I kind of calmed down, not seeing the man anymore, when the security guard called me back. He wanted to let me know that the man had never left and was circling around the entire store. I felt more dread than before pop up in my stomach. He didn't leave? Thankfully, he hadn't come back inside to see me. I felt kinda better for the fact that the security guard had seen him, so if anything did happen, there was someone who was able to identify him. By the time the store had closed and it was time to leave, two of my coworkers, Evan and Ethan, made sure to walk with me all the way to my car, not ever letting me be alone. I appreciated it a lot. Although I didn't want to admit it, I was scared walking through the alley. I was paranoid even that he was going to follow me home. I took the extra long route to see if anyone was trailing me. Thank goodness he wasn't. When I walked through the safety of my door of my house and locked it behind me, I let go of a breath I wasn't even aware I was holding in. I make sure now to always leave the store using the buddy system. I never walk alone, and I always make sure I'm hyper aware of my surroundings. I also never wear my name tag anymore. Luckily, nothing happened to me this time, and maybe I was just overthinking the entire experience, but I wanted to stress that even if your job is in customer service, if someone makes you uncomfortable like this, speak up. You shouldn't have to be subjected to this kind of behavior at your work, or anywhere else for that matter. This happened almost 3 years ago on Christmas Eve. At the time, I was working a retail job at the mall. I live in a reasonably sized city, and we have a great transit system. I had tried to get out of working the holidays, but of course that didn't happen. My parents were out of state visiting the rest of my family, and I had planned to take the Amtrak out there to visit them early in the morning. I got off work at around 9 p.m. and caught my first bus at the transit station below the mall. I had my headphones in and was minding my own business when a group of 3 guys in maybe their mid-20s got on the bus and sat behind me. I had my music playing pretty quietly, and I heard them start talking about me. I've always been afraid of strangers, so I tried to play it off and tell myself I was being paranoid, but I knew better. My first transfer was coming up, and I waited until the very last second to request my stop. The bus started slowing down, and as I stood up, I heard the 3 of them do the same. At this point, I was getting a little nervous. It was nearly 10 p.m., and although there were plenty of businesses in the area, no one was around, seeing as it was Christmas Eve and all of them were closed. I had to walk from the bus stop I'd gotten off at to a different one down the street to catch the bus that would take me to my apartment. There was a little shortcut that I'd never seen anyone take before, so I got off the bus and started to head that way. The 3 men followed me. I reached into my pocket and held my mace in my hand, something that most young women I know always have on them when taking public transit, especially at night. And I reached the next bus stop. I sat down in the shelter and pretended I didn't notice that I wasn't alone. One of the men enters the shelter and starts talking to me. "Hey baby, how you doing? What's your name? Why are you all by yourself so late at night?" I ignored him and stood up, and walked about 20 feet away from the bus stop. This is where things got real weird. One of the other men started walking toward me. I moved close to the street to let him pass me. As he kept walking on for about another 10 feet, he suddenly stopped and turned around. The other two were still standing next to the shelter. As I looked back at them, they started to walk towards me very fast. I turned around, and the third man who had already passed me was starting to do the same. I panicked and ran across the street as fast as I could, losing my favorite hat in the process, unfortunately. I saw that there was a fast food restaurant still open down the road. I looked behind me and saw that the three men were now running after me. I booked it to the fast food joint and ran inside. I told the guy at the counter what had just happened. He was a terrifying-looking man, about 6'4" and in his early 30s, covered in muscle. The men waited outside for a moment, but I'm pretty sure they bolted right away when they saw me talking to him. The employee took off out the door in search of them, but he couldn't find them anywhere. I waited there for almost an hour to make sure they wouldn't come back. I was too afraid to go wait for the next bus, so I ended up spending my train money for the next morning on a cab to get home, and spent that Christmas in bed watching TV. What is up, guys? Blue Spooky here, as always. Thank you guys so much for watching, especially if you made it this far to the end of the video. As always, be sure to let me know what you guys think, and please feel free to like, comment, or subscribe if you feel so inclined. I know some people have also had some problems about videos not appearing in their sub box, so please make sure to hit that little bell if you guys want to always be notified of when my next video comes out. As always, links to all of my social media will be in the description of the video below. You can find links to my Twitter, Gmail, Twitch, and Facebook accounts. So if you guys ever want to talk to me, just go ahead and shoot me a message on any of those, and I'll try to respond to your message as soon as possible. I'm also going to start trying to stream on Twitch a little bit more, so if you guys have notifications on there, you'll be notified right away when I go live. I might also try to do some on YouTube, but I haven't decided yet. I'm still kind of trying to decide what kind of streams I want to do. Anyways, if you guys have a story you would like to send in, or if you have a story you would like to suggest that I read, go ahead and send me a message on any of those links in the description below. If you do decide to send in a story, please be sure to include the title, how you would like to be credited, and any genres that the story might have, if it does have one. If you guys are curious about the music used in this video, go ahead and take a look in the description below as well. I always put all of the music in the order in which it appears in the video, and I also have links to the artists as well. Last but not least, I also have a Patreon if you guys feel like you want to contribute to the channel a little bit. But of course, as always, it is never required, and you will never have to pay for watching any of my videos, so that's just something you do if you feel like it. Thank you guys so much for watching, and please be sure to leave your feedback in the comments below. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I hope you guys have a great day. Thank you very much.